Well, I don't know. We've got some great titles of things that Mr. Davis presented to me.
Imagine Detroit in 1998. The historic Opera House is overflowing, its plush red seats occupied by dignitaries, vocal legends, and producers. They've all gathered under one grand roof to pay tribute to the indomitable Queen of Soul. Yet, while the stage radiates celebration, the atmosphere backstage is anything but joyful. Tension grips the air with razor sharpness. Aretha Franklin, sitting in her dressing room in silence, exudes the regal aura she's known for. But beneath it simmers fury. The trigger? A name listed in the evening's program that she had never given her blessing to include. With poised grace, Aretha calmly shuts her makeup case, locks eyes with her assistant, and delivers a warning in her signature composed but commanding tone. If he performs tonight, I'm leaving. Chaos ignites behind the curtain. Event organizers scramble to restructure the evening's lineup, their panic palpable. But Aretha didn't need a microphone to make her presence felt. Her very stare, her stillness, her silence could shift a room. For years, she stayed quiet about the ego clashes, the betrayals, and the covert power plays. But in the twilight of her reign, the Queen of Soul began to speak, and name names. These weren't minor feuds, they were long-standing, deeply personal scars. And the first name on her list? A rising star who dared to touch her crown. Beyoncé. It all started with what was meant to be a moment of mutual respect. A generational handoff during the 2008 Grammy Awards. Beyoncé stepped on stage, radiant, confident, and ready to introduce the iconic Tina Turner. With enthusiasm, she proclaimed, "Tina, the Queen." Applause thundered through the crowd, but miles away, Aretha Franklin sat unmoved. To the casual ear, it was a kind compliment. But for Aretha, who had carried the title Queen of Soul for over 40 years, through gospel stages, civil rights marches, and soul-shaking performances, it wasn't just thoughtless, it was an affront. That crown wasn't a nickname. It was legacy. It was survival. It was her identity. And to see it offered elsewhere, even across genres, without reverence, without acknowledgement, cut deep. Within hours, Aretha issued a rare public statement. She didn't name Beyoncé directly, but the message was crystal clear. She called the remark a cheap shot and an example of poor respect, shaking the music world. Some dismissed it as diva dramatics, but those who truly understood Aretha knew this wasn't about vanity. It was about visibility. It was about how the contributions of black women like her were so often overlooked, forgotten, or rewritten. From that moment, Aretha drew a line. She refused invitations to events where Beyoncé was headlining. She wouldn't appear on the same program, pose for photos, or share space. Behind closed doors, she was even sharper. Friends say she referred to Beyoncé as a talented girl who forgot to curtsy. But this clash was only the opening chapter. The next name on Aretha's list wasn't an up-and-comer. He was a legend in his own right, and once a friend, until he turned a shared stage into a spectacle. That name was Ray Charles. Their infamous non-duet goes back to the mid-1970s. Excitement was high for a televised event that would showcase two giants, Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles, performing together live. It was advertised as a soul milestone. The rehearsals went beautifully, full of mutual respect, laughter, harmony, and warmth. Everything hinted at musical magic. But when the cameras turned on, Ray changed the script. A master of spontaneity, he began altering the song's structure on the fly, elongating bridges, inserting flourishes, and playing loose with rhythm. What should have been a polished performance spiraled into chaos. Aretha, ever the consummate professional, tried to keep pace, but it was clear he had gone off script. To viewers, it might have seemed like artistic flair. To Aretha, it was sabotage. Off camera, Ray reportedly laughed with producers, saying, "She's good but not quick on her feet." That comment changed everything. To a woman who built her artistry on grace, control, and brilliance, being mocked, especially by someone she once called brother, was a deep insult. She never shared a stage with Ray again. Not on screen, not in studio, not even at private jam sessions. Though she never addressed it publicly, Insiders say she told confidants he had hijacked a duet to make her the butt of the joke. For Aretha, this wasn't just a musical disagreement. It was a betrayal wrapped in humiliation. And yet, the friction with Ray paled in comparison to what came next. Because the next man on her mental list didn't upstage her. He tried to manage her. That man was Luther Vandross, and their studio sessions quickly turned from collaboration to combat. In the early 1980s, Aretha was primed for a triumphant return to form. Clive Davis had just signed her to Arista Records, and he brought in young, acclaimed producer Luther Vandross to helm the project. It seemed like a dream match. Luther, meticulous and modern, Aretha, raw and majestic. But their creative chemistry sparked more fire than finesse. Vandross was exacting. He chased perfection, demanded precision, and edited vocals obsessively. Aretha, on the other hand, sang from instinct. Her voice was improvisational, spiritual, emotionally led. What started as subtle tension, eye rolls, drawn-out retakes, soon escalated. One night, after hours of strained recording, Luther reportedly snapped, "Stop over-singing, just be quiet." Aretha stood up, stared him down, and said coolly, "Nobody tells the Queen how to reign." Then she walked out. The resulting album, Jump to It, turned out to be a commercial success. But the sessions were toxic. Every harmony hit a fight. Every mix masked resentment. Aretha and Luther never collaborated again. In private, she was blunt. He made good music, but he made it hell to make. To outsiders, it looked like the usual clash between two perfectionists. But to Aretha, it was about more than creative differences. It was about being respected, or rather, disrespected. Even still, that battle didn't cut as deep as the one that followed, because the next artist on her list didn't fight her in the studio or the press. He dismissed her with a sentence. Keith Richards. In 2007, the Rolling Stones guitarist sat down for an interview with Rolling Stone magazine. The topic was music history, a celebration of icons and eras. But when the interviewer asked him about the state of modern soul, Keith's response shocked even longtime fans. He shrugged and said, "Soul died with Otis Redding. Aretha's still around, though." But it didn't feel the same. To some, it seemed like a grumpy old rocker clinging to yesterday's glory. But to Aretha Franklin, it felt like erasure. Like someone had casually brushed aside her legacy, dismissed her artistry, and questioned her continued relevance. And what made it worse? The comment came from someone who had witnessed her reshape an entire genre from just a few feet away. Aretha wasn't one to stay silent. Not this time. In a rare radio appearance soon after, she fired back with that classic mix of grace and sharpness. Some folks mistake loud guitars for depth, bless his heart. That quip became iconic. But behind the scenes, Aretha was seething. To her, it wasn't just a slight. It was a betrayal from someone whose entire musical journey had unfolded in tandem with hers, often in her shadow. She had reigned longer, topped more charts, and earned more Grammys than the Rolling Stones ever dreamed of. And still, Keith Richards had reduced her to a footnote beneath a man gone for over 40 years. Insiders claim that from that day forward, Aretha banned any mention of the Stones at her events. She turned down all joint appearances, refused to share stages or award shows if Richards was on the bill. She never performed alongside them, never mentioned him again. To Aretha, legacy wasn't a game. It was sacred, earned, and fiercely protected. But another icon tried to turn that legacy into something else entirely, Dionne Warwick. And what happened between them would ignite a flame that had been quietly smoldering for decades. In 2017, Aretha Franklin was already battling the kind of illness that drains even the strongest among us. She was keeping a low profile, saving her strength, and choosing her battles. But then an old wound reopened. A resurfaced headline revealed a comment Dionne Warwick had made 5 years earlier at Whitney Houston's funeral. She had said Aretha was supposed to perform, but never showed up. What Dionne didn't mention was that Aretha had been too sick to attend. Swollen feet, sheer exhaustion, and devastating grief had kept her home. To the world, Dionne's remark was a casual aside. But to Aretha, it was a sting, a public jab that felt like a betrayal. She stayed quiet at the time, but in 2017, she released something rare, a 5-page letter through the Associated Press, In it, she didn't hold back. She accused Dion of spreading falsehoods, of turning a solemn occasion into a spectacle, and of fueling unnecessary drama. This wasn't out of nowhere. Their relationship had long been tense. Subtle digs backstage, frosty exchanges at tributes, years of silent competition. But this time, Aretha had had enough. She ended the letter with a sentence that lit up headlines across the industry. Dion knows what she did. No explanation, no elaboration, just a razor wrapped in silk. The feud wasn't ended by forgiveness, but by finality. Because when Aretha said she was done, she meant it. But the next name on her list didn't offend her at a funeral. He did it in her own backyard, Detroit. And his name was Eminem, the hometown boy who never tipped his hat. Aretha Franklin didn't just live in Detroit, she was Detroit. Her voice rose from its churches, its vinyl stores, its soul clubs. She gave back relentlessly, mentoring artists, hosting fundraisers, and carrying the city's name around the world. So when Eminem rocketed to fame in the early 2000s and became the face of a new Detroit, Aretha anticipated at least a mention, a lyric, a sample, something. But nothing ever came. Song after song, Eminem name-dropped rap giants, rock icons, and local legends. But not Aretha. Not once. To many, it seemed like a harmless oversight. But to her, it felt like deliberate exclusion, a refusal to acknowledge the woman who helped pave the way. Aretha had shattered industry norms that weren't built for someone like her, clearing a path for artists of all stripes, including him. According to insiders, at a private dinner, someone brought up Eminem's rise. Aretha reportedly leaned back, gave a tight smile, and said, "He knows who I am. He just chose not to care." Later, when asked about his lyrics in an interview, she gave a single-word reply: noise. No feud, no public spat, just a permanent icy silence. Because to Aretha, her blessing wasn't given lightly, and withholding it meant everything. But the most unexpected wound came not from a rock star or a rapper, but from a man behind a piano, wearing a smile. Billy Joel, the duet that never happened. Aretha had long admired Billy Joel. She respected his writing, his stage command, and his respect for the musical trailblazers who came before him. So when the idea of a joint show was floated in the early 2000s, a piano-driven celebration of soul and pop, Aretha agreed to a trial rehearsal. She was hopeful, but from the first moment something felt off. Billy was warm but overly casual. His humor teetered on condescending. During a short break, he reportedly quipped, "Come on, Ree, lighten up. Take a shot of whiskey and let loose." He meant it as a joke, but Aretha didn't drink. Never had. Her power came from her rawness, not from dulling her edges. The remark wasn't just tone-deaf, it was insulting. Quietly, without a word, she gathered her things and left. No yelling, no dramatics, just a closed piano lid and silence. Later that week, a friend recalled her saying, "He plays like a poet, but talks like a fool." The concert was quietly scrapped. No press, no statement, just absence. From that point on, Billy Joel vanished from her world. No collaborations, no tributes, no shared stages. Because to Aretha, respect was the harmony beneath every note, and once it was broken, the music stopped. So why did Aretha keep these stories to herself for so long? Because for most of her life, she let the music do the talking. She was the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the voice behind Respect, Natural Woman, and Chain of Fools. But behind each breathtaking note was a moment, a rift, a silence she carried privately. Until now. At 76, with her legacy cemented and her time nearing its end, Aretha decided to speak, not for revenge, but for clarity. Because even queens bleed, even legends get scorched, and sometimes the strongest anthem is the one that finally says the names out loud. So, which name surprised you the most? And do you believe Aretha was justified in holding on to these slights? Or were they just the inevitable toll of greatness? Share your thoughts below, because while the queen may be gone, her voice still echoes louder than ever.